Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's episode, we're going to touch on several items Dale Earnhardt Jr. discussed on his podcast this week with NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell, including increased horsepower in 2026, what the future playoffs might look like, and race manipulation. Denny Hamlin's crew chief Chris Gayle appeared on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday and shared his experience from this past weekend at the Roval, including why the team radio was so quiet late in the race and the confusion that still exists in the garage about race manipulation. Plus, Steve Letarte and Christopher Bell were on SiriusXM the last couple of days and offered their thoughts on the increased horsepower. The NBC announcer suggests NASCAR shouldn't stop there. Plus, we'll go through who has the best average starting and finishing position for this weekend's races in the desert. And we'll wrap up with some fun facts and figures from Sin City. However, before we do that, let's go back to the Dale Jr. download this week and Jr.'s guest, NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell. As you might expect, they discussed a wide variety of interesting topics. One of those was the future of the playoffs. Take a listen.
Christopher Bell, right? So guy who will come in, have a conversation with me behind closed doors, doesn't go out and tweet about everything and say, hey, here's what I think, just gives me an honest opinion, which I agree with, of, hey, man, if I roll off 10 wins in a year, right, and I go to one race and a couple other guys get into me or whatever, and I'm not the champion. Okay, 4 years in a row that happens. I don't want the next Christopher Bell, who's 10 years old right now, thinking about NASCAR, wanting to go to NASCAR, wanting to be a champion, say, this is a little bit more of a chance on a one race, right? And I also look at it like Christopher Bell, to me, is a superstar in our sport. You roll off 4 championships in a row with 8 wins and a body of work, whatever that may be. That's good for our sport. Yeah. People are talking about him. And there's a couple things. So that's one I think about. I think about the Daytona 500. I think about how big that race is. And one of the narratives, he's in the playoffs. Man, it's the Daytona 500, right? Yes, it's in the playoffs. I like you have to win. Nobody can question, I will argue till I'm blue in the face, that the racing has changed in terms of if you got to win the race. Some racing has changed. So there's some of that element I don't want to go away. And then just looking at, future stars, drivers coming in, having a multitude of races potentially that you gotta put a body of work together, right? So I think about all those things. I'm not giving away where I'm at, but I completely recognize, where we're at today. I also recognize that a number of folks that are out there pretty vocally were part of this, right? And everybody said, hey, here's what we're going to do. And everybody signed up for that. So I think all I would want is wherever we go, we're going to communicate that, but we need the industry to buy in. To me, the biggest thing is we need the drivers to feel like whatever's in place, I had the shot, and we can start questioning them, right? If something happens, hey, look in the mirror versus maybe something happened in a one-race scenario. That's where I net out.
By the sounds of it, the postseason is definitely changing. The question is, what is it changing to? The second topic from the download interview with O'Donnell I wanted to talk about was race manipulation. So obviously there were some questions last week at the Roval that I talked about in Wednesday's episode on how some teams were talking to the drivers about points while others weren't. Here's what O'Donnell had to say about the topic.
Are there things, I guess, that the teams cannot say, absolutely cannot say, in terms of information they're feeding the driver about what the point situation may be in the middle of a race?
Yeah, no, it's tough, right?
How do you manage it?
Yeah, so we monitor every communication from every race team. Sometimes I would say that some of the race teams should be a little smarter in what they communicate, right? Because it sometimes makes it easy to look at things. But they've certainly gotten smarter on different code words or whatever it may be. But it's tough. We put a format in place, right? And we gotta live with those rules, whatever happens. So. Certainly when you look back at Charlotte, would there have been some questions if someone got in? Sure, we would have had to continue to look at that. We kind of set our eye on this one, but it's a tough line to draw. We got a lot of smart folks that kind of beat everything up, look through all the facts. But I will tell you, Dale, that if we're going to make a call, we got to be damn sure we're right, because there's so much riding on this. And so all the communication and everything, we better be able to go in and stand in front of our peers and say, here's at least why we did this.
Yeah.
And if we lose or get overturned, okay. But we need to be able to stand up against it. And so a lot of work goes into those things. We don't take it lightly when we're issuing a penalty or having those conversations.
I did think it was funny when he said some teams need to be a little smarter in what they communicate and how many of them are using code words. I also thought it was really interesting hearing him say how there would have been some questions at Charlotte if someone got in, and how officials said, all right, on this one and let it go. Curious comment. So that's what O'Donnell had to say about team conversations, race manipulation, and what officials are doing to keep an eye on it and prevent it from happening in the future. Now I want you to listen to Denny Hamlin's crew chief, Chris Gayle, who was on SiriusXM yesterday, and he talked about what happened last week at the Roval, including that tense exchange with his driver post-race, and the general confusion that still exists in the garage about what is and isn't allowed.
Some of the conversations were with Denny and obviously the 1 versus the 22 there at the cut line.
Yeah, I mean, we did not have any conversations over the radio specifically about that. I think the last time I'd updated him on that was at the start of stage 3, just with the whole point situation for everybody. I didn't really bring up the points situation there late in the race, and obviously we got wrecked on the last lap. I wish I had warned him a little more that, the one's going to be desperate here, and he might come and wreck you. But outside of that, I'm not sure what I could and shouldn't have said necessarily, whether I would have gone over the line on something or not, or if I could have just told him that point situation of the one specifically, in the last couple laps. So I just kind of moved on from that, and wish I had warned him so he would have known not to get wrecked, but that's about it.
Are you pretty clear on what you can say and what you shouldn't say on the radio?
In some areas, yes, and in others, no. I think it's still a little gray, specifically related to I thought maybe we knew, and then, I think we're all kind of watching this unfold the same way you guys are, and thought maybe some things were okay to say that weren't. And I think that NASCAR will give some clarity on that this week. I think, you've alluded to a few tweets and podcast notes where people have talked about this, and NASCAR saying they're going to talk to the team. So, I think that'll be what's needed. We'll see what's said in those meetings, and hopefully we walk away from there with a clear understanding of what can and can't be said.
Sounds like NASCAR officials will be talking with the teams this weekend about what is expected in the final 4 races. And our final topic from O'Donnell's download interview has been the most talked about subject in the news this week, and that's the increase to 750 horsepower.
So let's just base it on horsepower, right?
Yeah.
So why 750? Why not 800? Why not 1,000? Mm-hmm. So if you look at where we are today, where we can go without completely changing over the industry, no secret, right? It costs a lot of money to go racing. And so whatever you do, you want to make sure that if you're going to change the horsepower within the car, you got to match it up with the aero. You got to match it up with your braking. All these different things come into play. You know that, right? From car store, if you make a change, you got to factor in tires. Where are we going? All those things. So 750, we looked at. We hear the fans. We hear the industry. Yes, we want to try and see what will work here. If you went beyond 750, we looked at almost $40 to $50 million cost to the industry. And so if you look at our job is, you want to make a call right away, but you got to think about the out years. And so we're looking at Dodge coming into the sport. We're looking at other OEMs coming into the sport, and then our current partners. Those guys like the engine today. Don't want to make a change unless we're going to stick with it. So we looked at this and said, all right, we can go to 750. You guys all good? Toyota, Chevrolet, Ford. Yeah, we're good with that. Mm-hmm. But we potentially want to go to a new engine architecture. That's a 3-year runway. So we didn't want to.
Like what?
You name it. It could be what you got on the street. It could be all kinds of
they
things.
Just want they want the opportunity to be there.
They want the opportunity to be there. They are totally open to any new OEM coming in and looking at a new architecture, but don't want to change just for change's sake. Mm-hmm. So when we looked at this, we said, all right, we got Dodge coming in. We know what they want to go. They're talking, can we put a Hemi in this? What can we do, right? Honda potentially. So any of those things. 3-year runway, we didn't want to say, all right, it's 1,000 now and then, just kidding, 3 years from now we're changing it again. That's hundreds of millions of dollars to the industry. So that's why, and I know fans, who cares about the money, just do it. But in this case, we want to take a step. We want to marry that up with aero, so we're going to do a test in the off season with at North Wilkesboro.
Yeah,
I think some of the drivers are happy about that. Just looking at what can we do with the tires now. Goodyear's stepping up, not perfect, right? But they've taken
stepped
a step.
up.
Yeah, and so you look at tires, horsepower, some of the aero things. Let's take a look, all mile and a half and under, and then go from there.
Now let's listen to what the aforementioned Christopher Bell had to say about the increased horsepower today on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio.
What do you think about having more horsepower? And secondly, what do you think that'll do to everything else with the race car right now when you add a little extra juice to these Cup cars?
Yeah, I think it's. I applaud NASCAR for going that direction. I think that's going to be a huge improvement for what we have on the short tracks. And between adding the power and continuing to work on the tires, it seems like we're making a dent in that road course and the short track package. A couple years ago we were talking about how the next gen car was just stuck to the racetrack and it was very hard to pass. Nobody was making mistakes. Well, we're just coming off of a road course at Charlotte Motor Speedway there that it was, I can promise you, that was the slickest road course I've felt in a very, very long time. So, you give us a lot more horsepower to what we had there at Charlotte last week, and we're going to be hanging on. So, I think that's what we all want. We want the cars to be hard to drive, and adding power is certainly going to make them harder than what we have. So, I like it.
And finally, here's what Steve Letarte had to say about a bump up in horsepower.
Yesterday, NASCAR announcing 750 horsepower for tracks less than a mile and a half in length. What are your thoughts?
So I love it for a simple reason. When I go to Richmond and I see the fast time a second or a second and a half slower than what I remember at Richmond, or we go to Bristol and we're not teasing 14.9s. I was there the day that Ryan Newman and Jeff Gordon qualified in the 14s, and our heads exploded. Because when you talk about entertainment, some of it also has to be just breathtakingly impressive when they're by themselves. And I want to see the best stock car drivers in the world go as fast as possible. Now, we know there's limitations of safety when we go to Talladega or even Michigan, but there's no reason for me that we can't go way faster at Richmond, way faster at Bristol. Those sort of things would be great. And I think increased speed will increase fall off, will increase, separate the field in talent. I think a horsepower is a great step. I think horsepower alone is a total miss. I think that the active horsepower, power to weight, could be worked on. I think the car is way too heavy, and I think it has a lot of aero drag and more horsepower. So I think that's what the fan needs to understand. I loved how Steve O'Donnell really just admitted it. He said, listen, we looked at a lot of things. This is as far as we can go with all the other things we, the league, is responsible for in a good business sense, which I believe 100%. Doug Yates is a great friend, right? I know Scotty Maxim very well. Like, I talk about that, and I think there's multiple opinions, but in the end, the president of NASCAR has to make a decision. That's what Steve O'Donnell has done. So I think that's a great step, but don't be afraid to keep changing.
I agree with Letarte. Don't stop there. But NASCAR isn't. I think that's been pretty evident. I remember it was March of 2024 at COTA. I asked multiple drivers about if they would be interested in an option tire. This was before option tires were even an option. And now we've already gone through the option phase, and teams are using those softer tires, which, as Bell said, made a dramatic difference this past weekend at the Roval. So the increase in horsepower, albeit not a big jump, should provide some additional opportunities for drivers to separate themselves and make passes. All right, now let's focus forward on this weekend's race at Las Vegas and take a look at where the drivers stack up in average starting and finishing position in the first 7 races on the 1.5 mile track in the Gen 7 car. It's really interesting to see the kind of separation the top 3 drivers have in finishing position from the rest of the field, clear by almost 3 full spots. Ross Chastain doesn't necessarily qualify great, but since the debut of the Gen 7 car in 2022, the watermelon farmer has been the best finisher at Las Vegas, earning an impressive average finishing position of 5.4. Take a look at who comes in at 2nd through 4th, and you HMS fans gotta be feeling good about your chances this weekend. Both William Byron and Kyle Larson are 2 of the best qualifiers in Sin City in this car and have the finishes to match it, including a couple of wins for Larson and 1 for Byron. Alex Bowman is 4th with an AFP of 11.5 and also has a win. Joey Logano slots in behind Bowman, and as you can see, the 3-time champion has been the best qualifier at Las Vegas in the Gen 7 car with a strong average starting position of 4.9. He's got an average finishing position of 12.6, and like Larson, is the only driver with multiple wins. Interestingly, Christopher Bell is the only other playoff driver inside the top 10 of average finishing positions, and he's tied with A.J. Allmendinger at 14 even. Take a look at Bell's average start, though, and it's also one of the best in the field at 6.1. Going down the list, the other playoff drivers include Chase Elliott, who isn't anywhere close to his 3 HMS teammates with an AFP of 19.5. Ryan Blaney comes in at 21.9, and lowest of the playoff drivers is Chase Briscoe, who has an AFP of 23.4. Something tells me Briscoe will finish better this time around. And finally, let's wrap up with this week's fun facts and figures. This weekend marks the 36th running of a NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This is the 8th playoff race held at Las Vegas, with each race opening a round in the playoffs. Round of 16 from 2018 to 2019, round of 12 from 2020 to 2021, and round of 8 from 2022 to present. Josh Berry became the first driver to earn his first Cup win at Las Vegas when he won in March. Speaking of the spring race, that race had a track record 32 lead changes. Here's one that makes you think we could be in for an exciting finish on Sunday. 7 of the last 8 Las Vegas races had a margin of victory of less than 1 second. The pass for the win came in the final 6 laps in 4 of the last 7 Las Vegas races. 3 of the last 5 Las Vegas race winners swept the stages. Joey Logano 4 and Kyle Larson 3 are the only repeat winners at Las Vegas in the last 15 races. 10 of the last 11 Las Vegas races were won from a top 10 starting position. Denny Hamlin in September 2021 is the only Toyota driver to win at Las Vegas in the last 11 races. The final green flag stretch was less than 16 laps in only 2 of the last 9 Las Vegas races. Kyle Larson won 5 of the last 8 stages at Las Vegas. And finally, the Stage 2 winner went on to win 10 of the 16 races at Las Vegas with stages. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. Let's talk about it. I want to hear what you guys thought of Steve O'Donnell's comments on various topics, including the increased horsepower, playoff changes, and race manipulation. On that last item, what did you think of his remark when he said how there would have been some questions at Charlotte if someone got in, and how officials said, all right on this one, and let it go? What did you think of Chris Gayle's comments about how the teams are still confused by what can and can't be said over the team radio? For me, that really seems like something that should have been communicated crystal clear to the teams at the start of the playoffs. And lastly, what did you think about the comments of Christopher Bell and Steve Letarte on the increased horsepower? Thanks again for checking out the latest episode and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the race weekend from Las Vegas, and we'll see you on Monday.